German Shepherd barked for hours at an injured bear. The baby, who answered that bark became a hero. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. Dawn broke over the mountain ridge, painting the sky in hues of amber and lavender. The Mason family cabin stood nestled among towering pines, a rustic refuge from the chaos of city life. Stella and Trent Mason had moved here 6 months ago with their 18-month-old daughter, Willow, and their loyal German Shepherd, Ranger. Ranger wasn't just any dog. His deep chocolate eyes held wisdom beyond animal instinct, and his protective nature had made him the perfect companion for little Willow. The pair were inseparable. Where the toddler crawled, Ranger followed, his tail gently swaying like a metronome, counting the beats of their shared happiness. That morning started like any other. Stella prepared breakfast while Trent chopped firewood outside. Willow sat on the cabin's wooden floor, stacking colorful blocks that tumbled with each attempt. Ranger watched from his spot by the fireplace, his eyes never leaving the child. But then something changed. Ranger's ears perked up, his body tensed. He moved to the window, nose pressed against the glass, fog forming around his snout. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "What is it, boy?" Trent asked, setting down his coffee mug. Ranger's answer came as a sharp, urgent bark that seemed to shake the cabin walls. Then another, and another. His barking grew more frantic, more desperate, as if he was trying to communicate something of grave importance. Stella picked up Willow, holding her close. "Ranger never barks like this," she whispered, her voice tinged with worry. "Something's wrong." Trent peered out the window toward the tree line. Nothing seemed out of place, yet Ranger continued his relentless barking, now pawing at the door, leaving scratch marks on the wood. "Maybe it's just a deer," Trent suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. Hours passed. Ranger refused food, water, and rest. His barking continued, sometimes softening to urgent whines, then escalating back to deep, thunderous barks that echoed through the mountain valley. His persistence was unnerving. It wasn't just an animal's reaction to a passing scent or sound. It was a call for help. By mid-afternoon, Willow had grown restless. The toddler squirmed in Stella's arms, pointing toward Ranger in the door. "Go," she said in her limited vocabulary. "Go, go." "No, sweetie," Stella soothed, stroking her daughter's soft curls. "Ranger's upset about something outside. We need to stay in." But Willow's face scrunched up, her lower lip trembling. She understood more than her parents realized. She felt Ranger's distress in a way they couldn't comprehend. The bond between child and dog transcended words. It was pure, instinctive connection. As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the cabin floor, Trent made a decision. "I'm going to see what's out there. This isn't normal, and Ranger's going to hurt himself if he keeps this up." He grabbed his rifle, a precaution in bear country, and opened the door just wide enough to slip through. Ranger bolted out before Trent could stop him, racing toward the dense forest at the edge of their property. "Ranger, come back!" Trent shouted, but the dog was already a tan blur disappearing among the trees. Inside, something extraordinary happened. Willow wriggled free from her mother's grasp, her tiny feet hitting the floor with determination. Before Stella could react, the toddler had pushed through the barely closed door and was tottering after Ranger with surprising speed. "Willow!" Stella screamed, her heart leaping into her throat. She rushed after her daughter, panic rising like a tide. The fading daylight cast an eerie glow through the forest canopy. Trent sprinted after Ranger whilst Stella scooped up Willow, who immediately began to cry and point forward, as if trying to communicate something of vital importance. "Trent!" Stella called out, clutching their squirming daughter. "Trent, where are you?" His voice came back strained and strange. "Stella, you need to see this, but keep Willow back." Cautiously approaching, holding Willow tightly despite her protests, Stella gasped at the sight before her. In a small clearing, illuminated by the last rays of sunlight, lay a young black bear. Its breathing was shallow, its side matted with dried blood. Ranger stood nearby, no longer barking but whining softly, his tail low. "It's injured," Trent whispered. "Badly. Looks like it might have been attacked by a larger predator or fell from a ridge." Ranger circled the bear, never threatening, never aggressive. This wasn't the behavior of a dog facing a dangerous wild animal. This was compassion, pure and simple. Willow squirmed harder in Stella's arms, reaching out toward the injured bear, tears streaming down her flushed cheeks. "Help," she said clearly, surprising her parents with the new word. "Help." The bear's eyes, pained and frightened, met Willow's. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Child and wild creature connected by the universal language of suffering and compassion. The silence of the forest was broken by a sound that made their blood run cold, a deep, rumbling growl from behind them. Slowly turning, they found themselves facing what they had feared most, the mother bear, standing on her hind legs, eyes fixed on the humans near her injured cub. Time seemed to stop. The air grew thick with tension. One wrong move could mean disaster. And then, little Willow did something that would change everything. The toddler let out a soft, melodic sound, not quite a word, not quite a song. A gentle humming that seemed to rise from deep within her soul. Before anyone could stop her, she slipped from her mother's trembling arms and took unsteady steps toward the massive mother bear. "Willow, no!" Stella's scream tore through the forest, but it was as if her daughter couldn't hear her. Trent lunged forward, but Ranger blocked his path, standing firmly between the man and the child, his posture making it clear, "Don't interfere." The mother bear lowered herself to all fours, nostrils flaring as she assessed this tiny human approaching her. Her muscles tensed visibly beneath her thick fur. One swipe of her powerful paw could end Willow's life in an instant. Every parental instinct screamed at Stella and Trent to grab their daughter, to run, to fight. But something kept them frozen in place. Perhaps it was fear. Perhaps it was Ranger's unwavering confidence. Or perhaps it was something more primal, a recognition that they were witnessing something beyond human understanding. Willow tottered to within feet of the mother bear, her chubby hand extended, palm up. The forest held its breath. Even the wind seemed to pause. The mother bear leaned forward, her massive head lowering to meet Willow's tiny hand. Her nostrils flared as she took in the child's scent. For 3 heartbeats, which felt like an eternity to the watching parents, bear and child regarded each other. Then, defying every natural law of wild animal behavior, the mother bear gently nudged Willow's hand with her nose before turning toward her injured cub. She lumbered over to the young bear, nosing it gently, before looking back at the humans with what could only be described as expectation. She wants our help," Trent whispered, his voice barely audible. Ranger barked once, as if in confirmation, and trotted to the injured cub's side. He looked back at the humans, his intelligent eyes conveying a clear message. "This is why I've been barking for hours. This is what I've been trying to tell you." "We need to call someone," Stella said, her voice steadier now as the immediate danger seemed to pass. "A wildlife rescue, a vet, someone who knows how to help." but they were miles from reliable cell service, and the sun was setting rapidly. Darkness in these mountains brought new dangers. The temperature would drop significantly, and other predators would emerge. The injured cub might not survive the night without help. Trent slowly approached the injured bear, keeping his movements deliberate and calm. The wound looks deep, but I don't think it's fatal if we can stop the bleeding and prevent infection. Years of hunting and outdoor survival had taught him basic animal first aid, though he'd never imagined using those skills on a bear. What happened next would later be described by Stella as a miracle unfolding in the wilderness. The mother bear stepped back, creating space for Trent to examine her cub. Ranger positioned himself beside Willow, who had sat down on the forest floor, still humming that strange, soothing melody. "I'm going to run back to the cabin for the first aid kit," Trent decided. "Stella, you and Willow stay here with Ranger. If anything changes—" He didn't finish the sentence. They both knew the delicate balance of trust could shatter in an instant. As Trent disappeared into the trees, Stella felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. She was feet away from one of nature's most protective and dangerous mothers, with only her toddler and a German shepherd as buffers. Minutes stretched like hours. Willow's humming continued, creating an almost mystical atmosphere in the clearing. The mother bear settled on her haunches, eyes never leaving her cub but occasionally glancing at the child with what Stella could only describe as wonder. A rustling in the bushes made Stella's heart skip a beat. It wasn't Trent returning. The sound came from the opposite direction. Ranger's ears perked up, and he shifted his position slightly, placing himself between the new threat and the vulnerable group in the clearing. From the shadows emerged an enormous male bear, at least twice the size of the mother. His scarred face and aggressive posture made his intentions clear immediately. This was a predator, and possibly the same one that had attacked the cub. The mother bear rose instantly, placing herself between the male and her cub, her warning growl vibrating through the clearing. But she was outmatched in size and strength, especially with an injured cub to protect. Stella grabbed Willow, backing away slowly, her mind racing for any escape route. Ranger, however, did the unthinkable. The German shepherd charged forward, his bark transforming into something fierce and primeval that Stella had never heard from him before. He positioned himself beside the mother bear, the unlikely allies facing the common threat together. The male bear paused, seemingly confused by this unexpected alliance. His small eyes darted between the dog and the mother bear, assessing this new dynamic. What happened next would later become legend in the local community. Trent burst back into the clearing, first aid kit in hand, and immediately assessed the dire situation. Without hesitation, he raised his arms wide and shouted at the top of his lungs, making himself appear as large as possible, a wilderness technique he'd learned for deterring bear attacks. The sudden noise startled the male bear, but it wasn't enough. The massive creature rose to his hind legs, towering over 9 feet tall, and roared a challenge that seemed to shake the very earth. Then, from the edge of the clearing came a new sound. Multiple voices, shouting and banging metal against metal. Flashlight beams cut through the growing darkness as 3 figures emerged from the trees. "Get back!" called a woman's authoritative voice. "Move away from the bears." The newcomers were dressed in the unmistakable uniform of forest rangers. The leader, a tall woman with a weathered face and determined eyes, carried a tranquilizer rifle. Her companions wielded powerful flashlights and what appeared to be bear deterrents. "Down!" she commanded, and Trent instantly pulled Stella and Willow to the ground. The male bear, now facing multiple humans making loud noises and bright lights, hesitated. The moment of indecision was all the forest ranger needed. With practiced precision, she fired the tranquilizer dart, hitting the male bear in his massive shoulder. The bear roared in anger and pain, taking 2 threatening steps forward before the fast-acting sedative began to take effect. His movements became unsteady, his aggression fading as the powerful drug coursed through his system. Finally, with a confused whimper that seemed almost plaintive, the great beast collapsed to the forest floor. "Is everyone all right?" the ranger asked, rushing forward while her colleagues secured the area. Her name tag identified her as Chief Ranger Eleanor Walsh. "We got reports of unusual bear activity in this area from hikers earlier today, but I never expected to find this." She gestured to the extraordinary tableau before her. A family with a toddler, a protective dog, and a mother bear hovering over an injured cub. "The cub is hurt," Trent explained quickly. "My dog, Ranger, he's been barking for hours trying to alert us. We just found them before you arrived." Eleanor's gaze moved from the injured cub to the protective mother, who surprisingly hadn't fled at the ranger's arrival. "This is highly unusual behavior," she said, her professional demeanor momentarily giving way to wonder. The mother should have attacked or run by now. But the mother bear remained, though tense and watchful, as if understanding these humans represented her cub's best chance for survival. Eleanor turned to her colleagues. "Radio for the wildlife veterinarian. We need Dr. Michaels and his mobile unit here as soon as possible." She then addressed the Mason family. "I've never seen anything like this in 20 years of wildlife management. Your dog somehow communicated with these bears? And your daughter?" She looked at Willow with astonishment. Stella nodded, still holding Willow close. "It's as if they understand each other." Willow was humming to them, and the mother bear just accepted her. Eleanor knelt down to examine the injured cub from a safe distance. "It looks like a territorial attack. The male we just tranquilized has been causing problems in the region, pushing into family territories. He's too aggressive to be relocated again." As twilight deepened into night, the forest clearing transformed into an impromptu wildlife rescue operation. The rangers set up powerful lamps, creating a pool of light around the injured cub. The mother bear, remarkably, allowed Dr. Michaels, a bearded man with gentle hands and a calming presence, to approach and treat her cub once he arrived, though she remained vigilantly nearby. "The connection your daughter and dog established with this mother bear likely saved all your lives," Dr. Michaels explained as he worked, his hands steady as he cleaned and treated the deep gash in the cub's side. "Bears typically avoid humans, but a mother with an injured cub might have attacked out of fear. Instead, she recognized your intention to help." Willow had fallen asleep in Stella's arms, exhausted from the day's events, but Ranger remained alert, positioned between the humans and bears as if supervising the entire operation. "I've been studying wildlife behavior for decades," Eleanor said, shaking her head in amazement. "But I've never witnessed this level of interspecies communication. Your daughter and your dog, they have a gift." As Dr. Michaels finished treating the cub, applying the last of the bandages, he stepped back with a satisfied nod. "He should recover, but both bears will need to be relocated to a safer territory, away from that aggressive male." The mother bear approached her cub, gently nuzzling the bandaged wound, before raising her head to look directly at the humans who had helped save her baby. For a moment, those present would later swear, there was a profound understanding in her wild eyes, an acknowledgement that transcended the natural boundaries between species. "We'll track their recovery and make sure they're released together once the cub is strong enough," Eleanor promised. "The male will be relocated to a more remote region, or possibly placed in a wildlife sanctuary if he continues to show aggressive behavior." As the makeshift operation began to wind down, with the cub now sedated for transport and the mother bear reluctantly accepting a tranquilizer dart so she could travel with her baby, Ranger finally relaxed. He returned to Willow's side, gently licking her hand as she slept. Trent placed his arm around Stella's shoulders. Our dog barked for hours at an injured bear, and our baby somehow knew exactly what to do. His voice was filled with wonder. How do we explain that? Maybe we don't need to explain it, Stella replied softly. Maybe we just need to accept that there are connections in this world that go deeper than our understanding. As they prepared to return to their cabin, now escorted by one of the rangers, Eleanor approached them one last time. What happened here tonight will become part of our research. The bond your daughter and dog formed with these wild animals could help us develop better wildlife management practices, maybe even save more animals and prevent human-wildlife conflicts. She hesitated, then added, "Would you be willing to share your story? It could make a real difference in how people understand and interact with wildlife." Trent and Stella exchanged a glance, both thinking of the extraordinary events they had witnessed, how their dog's persistent barking and their daughter's innocent bravery had created a bridge between the human and animal worlds. Yes, they agreed, the world should know this story. What they couldn't know then was how far their story would travel, or how many hearts it would touch. They couldn't foresee how Willow's connection with the bear would inspire a new generation of wildlife conservationists, or how Ranger would become a symbol of the deep, unspoken understanding that can exist between species. All they knew, as they carried their sleeping daughter back to the safety of their cabin under a canopy of stars, was that they had witnessed something profound. A moment when the barriers between human and animal had dissolved, revealing the compassion and understanding that can exist when we truly listen to each other, regardless of how different we may seem. And it had all begun with a German shepherd who refused to stop barking at an injured bear, and a baby who somehow understood exactly what he was trying to say. 3 months passed since that fateful evening in the woods. Spring had fully blossomed across the mountain range, painting the landscape in vibrant greens and splashes of wildflower colors. The Mason family's story had spread far beyond their small mountain community, capturing hearts and imaginations across the country. National news outlets had picked up the extraordinary tale of interspecies communication. Wildlife experts, animal behaviorists, and even spiritual leaders had weighed in on the significance of what had occurred that night. Some called it a miracle, others a fascinating example of animal intelligence and empathy, while scientists sought to explain it through studies of canine cognition and the natural empathy of young children. For the Masons, however, life had changed in more personal ways. Their remote cabin, once a sanctuary of solitude, now regularly welcomed researchers and documentary filmmakers hoping to understand the phenomenon they had witnessed. Ranger had become something of a celebrity. His soulful eyes and protective stance photographed countless times for magazines and television specials. But the most profound change was in Willow herself. The toddler, who had once communicated with simple words and gestures, now displayed an uncanny connection to animals of all kinds. Birds would land nearby when she sat in the garden. Deer ventured unusually close when the family took walks in the forest. It was as if the natural world recognized something special in her, a rare ability to bridge the divide between human and animal consciousness. Dr. Amanda Chen, a renowned animal behavior specialist from the University of Colorado, had been studying Willow and Ranger for weeks. On this particular morning, she sat at the Masons' kitchen table, reviewing her notes while Stella prepared coffee. "What you've described goes beyond anything in current scientific literature," Dr. Chen explained, pushing her glasses up her nose. Children often have an intuitive connection with animals, but Willow's ability to calm a mother bear, one of nature's most protective and potentially dangerous creatures, suggests something extraordinary. Trent leaned against the counter watching Willow and Ranger playing through the window. The bond between them had grown even stronger since the incident. "Do you think it could happen again? This connection she seems to have?" Before Dr. Chen could answer, a sharp knock came at the door. Eleanor Walsh, now a regular visitor to the cabin, entered with an urgency that immediately set everyone on edge. "We've got a situation," she announced without preamble. "The bears, the mother and cub you helped save, they've escaped from the wildlife sanctuary." Stella nearly dropped the coffee pot. "Escaped? How? I thought they were being kept in a secure enclosure until the cub fully recovered." Eleanor's weathered face showed signs of strain. They were. The rehabilitation was going well. Too well, perhaps. The mother became increasingly agitated in captivity and somehow managed to break through the fencing last night. She took her cub with her. "Isn't that natural?" Trent asked. "They're wild animals. Maybe they just wanted to return to the forest." Eleanor shook her head grimly. "Under normal circumstances, yes, but there are complications." She unfolded a map on the kitchen table. "First, the aggressive male bear, the one we tranquilized that night, was relocated to a wildlife sanctuary in Wyoming, but he escaped last month. We've been tracking him, and he appears to be making his way back to this territory." She pointed to a marked area on the map. "Second, there's a logging operation that just began here, less than 5 miles from where we found the injured cub. The bears are heading straight toward it. The noise and activity will disorient them," Dr. Chen said, immediately understanding the concern. "And if the mother feels threatened—" "Exactly," Eleanor confirmed. "We could have a dangerous situation, dangerous for the bears and for the logging crew. We need to intercept and redirect them, but our tracking devices show they're moving erratically. It's as if the mother bear is searching for something." At that moment, Ranger began barking at the window, the same urgent, insistent bark they had heard months before. Willow, who had been quietly playing with her wooden blocks, suddenly stood up, her eyes wide and focused on something beyond the glass. "Bear," she said clearly, pointing toward the forest. "Bear, come." The adults exchanged alarmed glances. Trent moved to the window, scanning the tree line. "I don't see anything." But Ranger's barking grew more frantic. He pawed at the door, turning to look at Willow, then back at the forest. "It's happening again," Stella whispered, a chill running down her spine despite the warm spring air. "They're communicating somehow." Dr. Chen quickly gathered her equipment, a digital camera, recording devices, and various sensors she had been using in her research. "If what you're suggesting is true, this could be an unprecedented opportunity to document this connection. But we need to be extremely careful." Eleanor was already on her radio, calling for backup. "I'm requesting a wildlife management team with tranquilizers and transportation equipment. We need to get those bears safely away from the logging operation." "What if—" Stella hesitated, the idea forming in her mind seeming simultaneously reckless and possibly brilliant. What if Willow and Ranger could help? If they truly have some kind of connection with these bears, maybe they could guide them away from danger. "Absolutely not," Trent said firmly. "I'm not putting our daughter anywhere near a potentially dangerous situation again, connection or no connection." "Wait," Dr. Chen interjected. "I'm not suggesting we put Willow in harm's way, but there might be something to this. The research on animal communication and imprinting is still developing. If these bears have somehow imprinted on Willow and Ranger after the rescue, They might follow their lead from a safe distance. Eleanor considered this. It's unorthodox, but we're facing a time constraint. The logging operation has already started for the day, and those bears are moving quickly. She studied the map again. If we could position ourselves here, at this ridgeline, we might be able to guide the bears toward the protected sanctuary to the north without direct contact. Outside, Ranger's barking changed tone, shifting from urgent alarm to something that sounded almost like greeting. Willow began her humming again, the same melodic sound she had made in the forest clearing months before. The adults moved to the window in time to see an extraordinary sight. At the edge of the forest, partially obscured by shadows, stood the mother bear. She was larger than they remembered, her winter coat beginning to shed in patches, revealing glossy black fur underneath. Beside her, looking healthy and significantly bigger, was her cub. "Impossible," Eleanor breathed. "They've traveled over 30 miles from the sanctuary, directly here." They weren't escaping, Dr. Chen realized, her voice filled with wonder. They were returning. They were looking for Willow and Ranger. The mother bear raised her head, sniffing the air, her eyes fixed on the cabin. The cub pawed at the ground excitedly, making small bouncing movements that, in any other young animal, might have been described as joy. What happened next would later be documented in Dr. Chen's groundbreaking paper, Cross-Species Emotional Recognition and Bonding in Ursus americanus. Ranger, breaking free as Trent opened the door to get a better look, bolted toward the bears. The humans held their breath, expecting the worst. But instead of aggression, the mother bear lowered her head in what appeared to be recognition. The cub bounded forward, meeting Ranger halfway, and the German shepherd and young bear engaged in what could only be described as play behavior. This defies everything we know about wild animal interactions, Dr. Chen whispered, frantically recording with her camera. This shouldn't be happening. But even more astonishing was Willow's reaction. The toddler squealed with delight, trying to push past her mother toward the door. "Bear, play," she insisted, reaching toward the animals. "Absolutely not," Stella said firmly, holding her daughter back. "It's too dangerous." But Eleanor, watching the interaction between Ranger and the bears with professional assessment, slowly shook her head. "I wouldn't have believed it if I wasn't seeing it with my own eyes, but there's no aggression. The mother bear is completely relaxed. She's treating your dog like he's part of her family group. It's like they've formed their own unusual pack," Dr. Chen suggested, making notes while still recording. "A cross-species social bond. There are documented cases of different species forming attachments, but nothing involving large predators and domestic animals like this." Trent, still wary, kept his position between his family and the door. "Even if that's true, we can't risk Willow out there." "What about a controlled interaction?" Dr. Chen suggested. "From the porch, with multiple safety measures in place. If I could document this connection, it could revolutionize our understanding of animal cognition and emotional bonding." As they debated, a new sound cut through the morning air, the distant but unmistakable roar of heavy machinery. The logging operation was moving closer. The mother bear's head snapped up, her relaxed demeanor instantly replaced with tension. The cub scurried back to her side. "We're running out of time," Eleanor warned. "Those bears need to move away from the logging site or we'll have a potentially dangerous confrontation." It was Stella who made the decision. "We'll help," she said firmly, "but from a safe distance with every precaution. If Willow and Ranger can somehow guide these bears to safety, we have to try." What followed was a hastily organized but carefully executed plan. Within an hour, the Mason family, accompanied by Eleanor, Dr. Chen and 2 additional wildlife officers had positioned themselves at the strategic ridgeline Eleanor had identified. Trent carried Willow in a secure backpack carrier, while Stella kept Ranger on a reinforced leash. From this vantage point, they could see the logging operation in the valley below, large yellow machines tearing through the forest, the sound of chainsaws and falling timber echoing across the landscape. On the opposite side lay the protected wilderness sanctuary, thousands of acres of pristine forest where the bears would be safe from human encroachment. The mother bear and her cub had followed them at a distance, staying just within sight but never approaching too closely. It was as if they understood the human's intention and were willing to be guided. "This is remarkable," one of the wildlife officers whispered to Eleanor. "In 20 years of bear management, I've never seen anything like it." Dr. Chen continued to document everything, her scientific skepticism gradually giving way to amazement. "The bears are exhibiting trust behavior typically only seen in animals with generations of domestication." At a safe point along the ridge, Trent set Willow down, keeping a firm hold on her hand. Ranger sat attentively beside them, his ears perked forward, completely focused on the bears. "What now?" Stella asked. "How do we show them which way to go?" To everyone's surprise, it was Willow who provided the answer. The toddler began her humming again, that same strange melody that seemed to resonate with something deep and primal. Ranger joined in with a soft whine, his body language relaxed but purposeful. The mother bear tilted her head, listening. Then, as if responding to an unspoken command, she nudged her cub and began walking along the ridgeline, away from the logging operation and toward the sanctuary. "It's working," Eleanor said in disbelief. "They're actually following the suggested route." For nearly 2 hours, this unusual procession continued, the humans and dog leading, the bears following at a respectful distance. When they reached the boundary of the protected sanctuary, marked by a weathered wooden sign, Willow suddenly sat down on the path. "Done," she announced with the simple confidence of a child. "Bear's home now." As if confirming her statement, the mother bear paused at the edge of the dense forest that marked the beginning of the sanctuary. She rose briefly to her hind legs, sniffing the air, before dropping back down. The cub romped around her feet, apparently eager to explore their new territory. Then, in a gesture that none of the witnesses would ever forget, the mother bear turned to face the humans one last time. She held their gaze for several long moments, her dark eyes reflecting an intelligence and awareness that defied simple explanation. She made a soft chuffing sound, not a growl but something gentler, before turning and disappearing into the forest with her cub. "Did that bear just say goodbye?" one of the wildlife officers asked, his voice hushed with wonder. Dr. Chen nodded slowly, lowering her camera. "I believe she did, and I believe she was expressing gratitude." The significance of what they had witnessed would take months to fully process. Dr. Chen's research, supported by Eleanor's official reports and the testimonials of the other wildlife officers, would eventually challenge the fundamental assumptions about the barriers between human and animal communication. The logging company, when presented with the extraordinary documentation of the bear guidance, agreed to create a wider buffer zone around the sanctuary, preserving crucial habitat corridors for wildlife movement. It was a small victory in the larger battle for conservation, but a meaningful one, especially for the bears, who now had a safer home. For the Mason family, the experience transformed their understanding of their place in the natural world. They became dedicated advocates for wildlife protection, with Trent eventually joining the local conservation commission and Stella developing an educational program for children about respecting and understanding wildlife. Ranger received official recognition from the American Veterinary Medical Association for his role in wildlife rescue, the first domestic dog to be honored for communicating the distress of a wild animal and facilitating its rescue. But perhaps the most profound impact was on Willow herself. As she grew from toddler to child, her unusual connection with animals remained, developing into an intuitive understanding that defied conventional explanation. By age 5, she could approach injured wildlife that would normally flee or fight, calming them enough to allow treatment. By 8, she was accompanying wildlife rehabilitation specialists on calls, her presence often making the difference between a successful rescue and a failed one. On her 10th birthday, the Mason family returned to the sanctuary where they had guided the mother bear and her cub years before. The forest had reclaimed much of the ridgeline path, nature's resilience erasing the marks of human passage. They hiked to a small clearing that overlooked the valley, now thick with new growth where the logging had once threatened. As they unpacked a picnic lunch, Ranger, older now, his muzzle graying but his eyes still bright with intelligence, suddenly perked up his ears. He rose stiffly from his spot beside Willow and faced the dense undergrowth at the edge of the clearing. A moment later, a large black bear emerged from the shadows. Though older and larger, there was something familiar in her movements, in the way she carried herself with calm confidence. Behind her followed a nearly full-grown bear, no longer a cub, but not yet fully mature. "It's them," Stella whispered, instinctively pulling Willow closer. But Willow simply smiled, that same serene expression she had worn as a toddler in the face of what others perceived as danger. "She remembered," the girl said simply. "She wanted to show us her baby is all grown up now." The mother bear made no move to approach closer, maintaining a respectful distance. She sat on her haunches, watching the human family with what appeared to be recognition. The younger bear, curious but cautious, stayed by her side. Ranger, moving with the careful dignity of an aging dog, walked halfway between the humans and bears. He sat down, tail sweeping the ground in slow, measured movements. A bridge between worlds. For several minutes, this tableau held. Two families, different species but connected by an extraordinary shared experience, acknowledging each other across the clearing. No words were spoken, no sounds exchanged, yet communication flowed between them as tangible as the sunlight filtering through the trees. Finally, the mother bear rose, nudged her nearly grown offspring, and with one last glance at the humans, disappeared back into the forest that was their home. "That," Trent said softly, his arm around Stella's shoulders, "is why we do what we do now. Why what happened that day matters so much." Willow nodded, her young face solemn with understanding beyond her years. "They're just like us, really," she said. "They care about their families. They remember kindness. They just speak a different language." As they packed up their picnic and prepared to head back down the mountain, a local news helicopter passed overhead, its distant thrum a reminder of the human world that existed beyond this peaceful sanctuary. The story of the bear whisperer girl and her loyal German shepherd had become something of a legend, retold and sometimes embellished in countless media accounts. But the truth, the real connection that had formed between a barking dog, a fearless toddler, and a mother bear fighting to save her cub, was more profound than any news story could capture. It was a reminder that sometimes, when we listen closely enough, we can hear and understand languages we were never taught to speak. That compassion can bridge divides that seem insurmountable. That heroes sometimes come in the most unexpected forms, like a German shepherd who wouldn't stop barking, and the baby who answered that bark and became a bridge between worlds. As they descended the mountain trail, Willow walked with one hand resting lightly on Ranger's back, the other clasping a small carved wooden bear, a gift from a local artist inspired by their story. Behind them, unseen but present, the spirit of understanding they had awakened continued to grow, rippling outward to touch other lives, other hearts, changing the way people viewed their relationship with the wild world around them, one story at a time. 7 years later, Willow Mason stood at the podium of the International Wildlife Conservation Conference in Denver, a poised 17-year-old with the same penetrating gaze that had once locked with a mother bear's eyes. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a simple braid, and around her neck hung a pendant carved from ethically sourced bear bone, a gift from an elder of the local indigenous tribe who had recognized in her something their people had honored for generations, the ability to walk between worlds. "I don't claim to understand why I was given this connection," she told the audience of scientists, conservationists, and policymakers. "I just know that it comes with responsibility." The conference hall was packed to capacity. People had traveled from across the globe to hear from the young woman whose extraordinary bond with wildlife had inspired a revolution in conservation practices. In the front row sat her parents, Stella and Trent, pride evident in their faces. Beside them, in a special harness that identified him as a service animal, lay Ranger, now elderly at 14, his once vibrant coat almost completely gray, but his eyes still alert and intelligent. "My story isn't unique," Willow continued, her confidence belying her youth. "Throughout human history, there have been individuals who formed connections with animals that defied explanation. Indigenous cultures worldwide have honored these connections rather than dismissing them. What's different now is that modern science is finally catching up, finally willing to examine these phenomena without prejudice." She gestured to a series of brain scans projected on the screen behind her. Dr. Chen's research has identified unusual activity in the limbic systems of individuals like myself, patterns that suggest enhanced empathetic processing and nonverbal communication capabilities. But the science is just beginning to understand what many cultures have known for centuries, that the barriers between species are more permeable than we once believed. As Willow's presentation continued, detailing the groundbreaking wildlife rehabilitation techniques she had helped develop, a commotion at the back of the hall drew attention. Conference security personnel were speaking urgently into their radios, and the doors to the hall opened to admit 2 uniformed park rangers. Dr. Eleanor Walsh, now the Regional Director of Wildlife Management, excused herself from the panel and hurried to meet them. After a brief, intense conversation, she approached the stage, interrupting Willow mid-sentence. "I'm sorry," Eleanor said, her voice low but urgent. "We have an emergency situation that requires your specific expertise, Willow." Murmurs spread through the audience as Willow stepped away from the podium. Eleanor quickly explained the situation to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for this interruption. A critical wildlife situation has developed that may benefit from Ms. Mason's unique abilities. We'll take a brief recess and resume the conference as soon as possible." Backstage, away from the curious eyes of the audience, Eleanor revealed the full gravity of the situation. "There's been a major landslide in the northern section of the sanctuary, the area where your bears have been living all these years." Eleanor's use of "your bears" had become common shorthand among wildlife officials for the mother bear and her offspring that had formed such an unusual bond with Willow and Ranger. "Several bears are trapped, including what we believe is the same female you've encountered before." Willow's heart raced. How bad is it? Bad enough that traditional rescue methods could cause more harm than good. The landslide has created an unstable pocket where at least 3 bears are trapped. Heavy equipment could trigger a secondary collapse. Tranquilizing them might work, but if they panic before the sedative takes effect... Eleanor didn't need to finish the thought. Trent and Stella had joined them backstage, Ranger at their side. "What exactly are you asking of our daughter?" Trent demanded, the protective father emerging despite years of supporting Willow's unusual calling. Eleanor met his gaze directly. "We need Willow to help calm the bears so we can safely extract them. If they cooperate, we can get them out without risking further injury. It's not just the original bears," added one of the park rangers. "The mother has had 2 more cubs since we last documented her. There's also another adult female, possibly her daughter from that first litter you helped save." Willow knelt beside Ranger, her hands gently cradling his graying muzzle. "What do you think, old friend?" "One more mission." The aging German shepherd's tail wagged softly, his roomy eyes somehow sharper now, more focused. Despite his years, he still responded to the call of purpose. "I'll do it," Willow said, standing. "But Ranger comes too. They know him." "Willow," Stella began, concern etching her features. "Ranger isn't young anymore. This could be dangerous for him." "He knows that, Mom," Willow replied with the certainty that had marked her connections with animals since childhood. "He's choosing this. I can feel it." Within the hour, a helicopter had transported them to the northern ridge of the sanctuary. The landslide was massive. A great scar torn across the mountainside, uprooted trees and boulders creating a chaotic maze of debris. At the bottom of the slide area, rescue workers had established a perimeter, but were keeping their distance from the unstable pocket where the bears were trapped. Dr. Chen had insisted on accompanying them, bringing specialized monitoring equipment. Over the years, she had documented dozens of Willow's interactions with wildlife, gradually building a scientific framework to explain the inexplicable. "I'm recording your neurological patterns during this interaction," she explained, attaching small sensors to Willow's temples. "The data could help us identify others with similar abilities." Willow nodded absently, her focus already shifting to the task ahead. She closed her eyes, centering herself with the meditation techniques she had developed to enhance her unusual gift. Beside her, Ranger stood alert, his aging body somehow straightened by purpose. "They're afraid," Willow said softly, "not just of the collapsed earth, but of the machinery, the people, the noise." Her eyes opened, now filled with determination. "I need to get closer." "Absolutely not," Trent interjected. "You can work from here, at a safe distance." But Eleanor, who had witnessed Willow's abilities evolve over the years, shook her head. "The protocol we've established gives Willow operational authority in wildlife communication situations. If she needs closer access, we provide it, with safety measures." What followed was a carefully orchestrated advance toward the landslide zone. Willow and Ranger, accompanied by 2 experienced rescue climbers, slowly picked their way through the edge of the debris field. Each step was calculated, each handhold tested before weight was applied. When they reached a relatively stable outcropping about 50 feet from the trapped bears, Willow signaled for everyone to stop. From this vantage point, she could see into the pocket created by crossed fallen trees and a massive boulder. Inside, just as reported, were 3 adult bears and 2 cubs, huddled together in the small safe space. One of the adults, the largest female, raised her head, sniffing the air. "It's her," Willow whispered, recognition flowing through her. Despite the years, despite the changes in both of them, the connection remained. "She remembers us." Ranger, detecting the familiar scent, gave a soft whine. Not the bark of his younger days, but a gentle sound of recognition. The trapped bears shifted, the large female moving protectively in front of the others. But there was no aggression in her posture, only wariness, uncertainty. Willow closed her eyes again, reaching out with that part of herself that had never been adequately explained by science. She began to hum, the same melody she had used as a child, now deepened and enriched by years of practice. It was not quite music, not quite language, but something in between that seemed to resonate on a frequency animals could understand. Ranger added his own contribution, a soft, throaty sound that carried memories of their shared past. On the ridge above, watching through binoculars, Dr. Chen whispered into her recorder, "Subject has initiated acoustic connection protocol. Bears showing preliminary response. Ears forward, posture relaxing. Extraordinary recognition behaviors between ursine matriarch and canine counterpart. The next part of the rescue would require perfect timing and complete trust." Eleanor had positioned wildlife veterinarians with tranquilizer rifles at strategic points surrounding the landslide zone. Not to subdue the bears against their will, but to administer mild sedatives once Willow had established connection, just enough to keep the bears calm during extraction without rendering them unconscious. Willow raised her hand, the signal they had agreed upon. The veterinarians fired simultaneously, the darts finding their marks with practiced precision. The bears flinched, but did not panic, Willow's influence holding them steady as the mild sedative began to take effect. "Now," Eleanor commanded into her radio. The rescue team moved in with specialized equipment, extendable platforms to create a safe exit path, harnesses designed for bear anatomy, and hydraulic lifts to move the boulder that formed part of their prison. Throughout the extraction, Willow maintained her humming connection, her presence a bridge between the human rescuers and the frightened bears. Ranger stood guard beside her, his aging body tense with protective instinct. What no one had anticipated, however, was the instability of the outcropping where Willow and Ranger were positioned. As the rescue team shifted the boulder, a subtle tremor ran through the debris field. The vibration was enough to dislodge the fragile balance of the earth beneath Willow's feet. With a sickening lurch, the ground gave way. Willow felt herself falling, scrabbling desperately for purchase as the rock shelf collapsed. Ranger lunged toward her, his old body summoning one last heroic effort, teeth closing gently but firmly around her wrist. For one heart-stopping moment they hung suspended, Willow dangling over a 20-foot drop, Ranger somehow bracing himself against the remaining solid ground, holding her with all his fading strength. "Willow!" The scream came from multiple voices. Her father, the rescue team, Dr. Chen. The rescue climbers moved with expert speed, securing safety lines and reaching Willow within seconds. But in those few moments of crisis, something remarkable happened. The largest bear, the matriarch they had saved years before, broke free from her handlers despite the sedative, and moved with surprising speed to the edge of the collapse. With one powerful swipe of her massive paw, she scooped up Ranger, who was beginning to slip. The German shepherd and the bear, unlikely allies once more, created a bridge that held Willow suspended just long enough for the rescue team to secure her. As the climbers pulled Willow to safety, the bear gently released Ranger, allowing the rescue team to bring him up as well. The moment crystallized everything that Willow's life work had been trying to prove, that animal consciousness, empathy, and connection transcended the boundaries humans had constructed. "She remembered," Willow whispered, cradling Ranger's exhausted form as the rescue team secured them both. She knew he saved her cub, she was returning the favor. The bear extraction continued without further incident. All 5 bears were safely removed from the landslide zone, examined by veterinarians, and released into a secure area of the sanctuary while their habitat was assessed for safety. But the day's events had taken their toll on Ranger. The elderly dog's heroic effort had drained his remaining strength. As the rescue helicopter transported them back to the conference center, He lay with his head in Willow's lap, his breathing shallow. "He knew," Willow said softly to her parents, tears streaming down her face. "He knew this would be his last mission. That's why he insisted on coming." Dr. Chen, monitoring Ranger's vital signs, nodded solemnly. Animals often seem to understand the timing of their own mortality in ways humans don't. It's as if they can sense when they've fulfilled their purpose. That evening, in a quiet room at the conference center's veterinary facility, Ranger passed peacefully, surrounded by the family he had served so faithfully. Willow lay beside him on the floor, her arm draped over his still form, whispering gratitude for all he had taught her. "He wasn't just a dog," Trent said, his voice breaking. "He opened a door none of us knew existed." News of Ranger's passing spread quickly through the conference. What had begun as a scientific gathering transformed overnight into something more profound. A collective recognition of the bonds that could exist between species, symbolized by a German shepherd who had barked for hours at an injured bear, setting in motion a lifetime of interconnection. The morning after Ranger's passing, as Willow stood at the podium to complete her interrupted presentation, she was surprised to find the auditorium transformed. The sterile conference hall had been adorned with flowers, photographs of Ranger, and artwork depicting the famous bear rescue. Indigenous elders from several tribes had arrived during the night, bringing traditional songs and blessings to honor what they recognized as a sacred passage. "My presentation today will be different than planned," Willow began, her voice steady despite her grief. "Instead of telling you about techniques and protocols, I want to tell you about a German shepherd named Ranger, who taught me that the most important scientific instrument we possess is an open heart." As she spoke, a strange sound filtered through the conference hall's open windows, a deep, rhythmic huffing that those familiar with bear vocalizations instantly recognized. Outside, at the perimeter of the conference center grounds, stood the bear matriarch, somehow having followed them from the sanctuary, keeping a respectful distance but making her presence known. Wildlife officials moved quickly to secure the area, but Willow raised her hand to stop them. "She's not here to cause harm," she said with absolute certainty. "She's here to mourn, to acknowledge, to remember." In that extraordinary moment, a 17-year-old girl addressing a global scientific conference while a wild bear paid respects from beyond the boundaries of human civilization, something shifted in the collective understanding of those present. It wasn't just about a unique child with an unusual ability. It was about the possibility that the divisions between species were illusions of human creation. The media called it the Denver moment, that point when mainstream science finally acknowledged the possibility of conscious, intentional communication across species boundaries. Legislation followed, fundamentally altering wildlife management practices and establishing new ethical frameworks for human-animal interactions. Universities created new interdisciplinary programs combining ethology, neuroscience, and communication studies. Young people with sensitivities similar to Willow's, once dismissed as imaginative or fanciful, were identified and mentored, their gifts cultivated rather than suppressed. For Willow, the path forward was clear but bittersweet. Without Ranger at her side, she felt an emptiness no human companion could fill. Yet his legacy lived on in every connection she formed, every animal she helped, every mind she opened to new possibilities. 6 months after Ranger's passing, on a crisp autumn day, Willow returned to the sanctuary alone. She hiked to the special clearing where they had shared their 10th birthday picnic, where the mother bear had shown them her growing cub. The forest felt different without Ranger's presence beside her, but not empty. Never empty. She sat cross-legged on a flat rock, closed her eyes, and began to hum softly. The melody had evolved over the years, becoming more complex, carrying the weight of experience, loss, and deepening understanding. The rustling came slowly, cautious movements through the underbrush that gradually grew more confident. When Willow opened her eyes, she found herself surrounded by bears. Not just the matriarch and her family, but nearly a dozen bears of varying ages, arranged in a loose semicircle around her rock. Among them was a young bear cub, smaller than the others with unusual white markings on its chest. It approached with curious, wobbling steps while the adults watched attentively. When it reached Willow, it rose on its hind legs and placed a paw gently on her knee, a gesture so reminiscent of Ranger's reassuring touch that tears sprang to her eyes. The matriarch made a soft chuffing sound, and the little bear turned, trotting back to the safety of the group. But the message was clear. Life continued. Connections remained, new bonds would form. As Willow hiked back down the mountain that evening, a plan began to crystallize in her mind. A sanctuary within the sanctuary, a place where humans and animals could learn from each other in safety and mutual respect. A living memorial to a German shepherd who had barked until someone listened, and a baby who had heard what no one else could hear. 20 years later, the Ranger Institute for Interspecies Communication stood as a testament to that vision. A revolutionary facility where scientists, indigenous knowledge keepers, and individuals with special animal connections worked together to explore the frontiers of cross-species understanding. Its logo, the silhouette of a German shepherd and a bear cub, side by side. Dr. Willow Mason, now a respected researcher with advanced degrees in both ethology and neuroscience, led the institute with the same quiet determination that had characterized her approach to animals since childhood. Her methods merged rigorous scientific protocol with the intuitive understanding she had been born with. The day the institute celebrated its 10th anniversary, visitors from around the world gathered to witness its accomplishments. Among them were Stella and Trent Mason, now in their 70s but still vibrant advocates for wildlife conservation. Did you ever imagine that day when Ranger wouldn't stop barking, that it would lead to all this? A journalist asked Stella during the celebration. Stella smiled, watching her daughter across the room, now demonstrating a new communication technique with a rescued wolf. We knew Willow was special from the moment she was born, but I think the real miracle was that we were willing to listen to Ranger, to Willow, to the bears. Sometimes the greatest scientific discoveries happen when we simply pay attention to what the world is trying to tell us. As the celebration continued, Willow slipped away from the crowd, walking the familiar path to her private thinking spot, a small observation deck overlooking the bear habitat. Below, several generations of the original matriarch's family now lived in protected comfort, serving as ambassadors between their species and humanity. A soft whine made her turn. Beside her sat a German shepherd, not Ranger, of course, but his great-grandniece, Sage, bred from his bloodline and possessing something of his special sensitivity. Willow had discovered that certain lineages of animals seemed to carry heightened communication abilities, just as certain human families did. Sage was part of the Institute's ongoing research into these genetic predispositions. "I know," Willow said softly, scratching behind Sage's ears. He would have loved to see this. But in a way, he does. Every time an animal trusts us enough to communicate, every time a human listens deeply enough to hear, he's still here. Beyond the observation deck, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in colors no human artist could replicate. In the twilight between day and night, in the space between human and animal, in the silence between words and meaning, The spirit of connection that had begun with a barking dog and a brave baby continued to grow, reaching across boundaries and beyond horizons, one story at a time. And somewhere in the language of the forest, in the memory of the mountains, in the wisdom of the wild, the echo of that first urgent bark remained, a call to attention, a plea for help, a bridge between worlds that, once crossed, could never truly be undone. On the evening of her 50th birthday, Dr. Willow Mason sat alone on the observation deck of the Ranger Institute. The facility had grown beyond anything she could have imagined as a child, now spanning hundreds of acres, with research centers, rehabilitation facilities, and protected habitats for dozens of species. Her work had transformed how humans interacted with wildlife across the globe. But success had come with sacrifice. The intensity of her connection to animals, the demands of her research, the constant travel to crisis zones where her abilities were needed, all had left little room for traditional human relationships. She had never married, never had children of her own. Her family was the Institute, her legacy the countless animals saved and humans educated. As twilight deepened into night, Willow felt the weight of time pressing upon her. Her parents had passed away within months of each other 5 years earlier. Most of the bears from the original family she had bonded with as a child had completed their natural lifespans. Sage, Ranger's descendant and faithful companion for 15 years, had died peacefully the previous winter. For the first time in decades, Willow found herself truly alone. No animal at her side, no immediate purpose demanding her attention. The silence felt both unfamiliar and somehow right, as if she had finally earned this moment of solitary reflection. From her pocket, she withdrew the small wooden bear carving she had carried since childhood. Its features had been smoothed by decades of worried thumbs and comforting touches. It had been with her through every major moment of her life. Graduations, awards ceremonies, crisis interventions, moments of triumph and despair. "I think I understand now," she whispered to the empty air, "why it was me, why it was us." The spring night air carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. In the distance, she could hear the soft movements of animals in their habitats, the familiar rhythm of life continuing its ancient dance. Closing her eyes, Willow began to hum, that same strange melody that had first formed on her lips as a toddler. But tonight the humming felt different. Deeper, more resonant, as if it were being drawn from the very earth beneath her feet, rising through her body like sap through a tree. When she opened her eyes, her breath caught in her throat. The observation deck was surrounded by animals, not just bears, though they were there, massive shadows in the gathering darkness, but wolves, deer, mountain lions, foxes, eagles perched in nearby trees, smaller creatures scattered among them. Some were residents of the Institute's habitats. Others had come from the wild beyond its boundaries. All stood in perfect, impossible harmony, predator beside prey, natural enemies temporarily united in something greater than their instinctual divisions. At the front of this extraordinary gathering stood an ancient female bear. Impossibly old, her muzzle completely gray, her movements slow but deliberate. Willow recognized her immediately, though logic insisted it couldn't be true. No bear lived this long. And yet, "You," Willow whispered, tears filling her eyes. "It's still you." The matriarch bear, the same one Ranger had barked at nearly half a century before, approached the deck with dignified steps. With effort, she rose to her hind legs, her dark eyes fixed on Willow with unmistakable recognition. In that moment, Willow understood what few humans ever truly comprehend, that she was both uniquely special and completely ordinary. that the connection she had forged was simultaneously miraculous and the most natural thing in the world. That animals had always been speaking to humans. Humans had simply forgotten how to listen. As if in confirmation of this revelation, the night around her filled with sound, not chaotic or frightening, but harmonized. The wolf's howl, the eagle's cry, the deer's soft huffing breath, the bear's deep rumble, all joining together in what could only be described as a chorus. Willow realized her own humming had never stopped, that she was part of this symphony, neither leader nor follower, but simply one voice among many in the ancient conversation between species. From the shadows at the edge of the deck, a new figure emerged. A German shepherd, its coat glowing silver in the moonlight. Not ranger, not sage, not any dog she had known in life, and yet familiar in a way that transcended physical form. The spectral dog approached, sitting beside her as Ranger had done countless times. Though she could not feel him physically, the comfort of his presence was overwhelming. Willow understood then that some connections never truly die. They simply change form, becoming part of the invisible web that sustains all living things. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion, "for barking until someone listened, for showing me the way." As if in response, the assembled animals began to retreat, slowly, without fear or hurry, returning to their separate worlds, but forever changed by their moment of unity. The matriarch bear was the last to leave, holding Willow's gaze for one final moment before disappearing into the darkness with surprising grace for her age. The spectral dog remained a moment longer, its luminous form gradually fading until only the memory of its presence remained. Alone once more, Willow found that the emptiness she had felt earlier was gone, replaced by a profound sense of fullness. She had been part of something tonight that few humans ever experienced, a glimpse behind the veil that separated species, a reminder that in the deepest sense, such separation was illusion. When she finally rose to leave, her steps were lighter, her purpose renewed. There was still work to do, still bridges to build, still barriers to overcome. But she would no longer do it alone, not truly. Every bark, every growl, every chirp and howl and roar was part of the same conversation. Every creature that had ever touched her life remained within her, guiding her forward. As she reached the door to the main facility, Willow paused, turning back to gaze once more at the starlit mountains beyond. In the distance, the faint echo of a single bark floated on the night air. Whether memory or reality, she couldn't say. And it didn't matter. The message had been received, the connection made, the story begun. A German shepherd had barked for hours at an injured bear, and the baby who answered that bark had become not just a hero, but a bridge between worlds, proving that with enough love, enough patience, enough willingness to listen, any divide could be crossed, any difference reconciled, any heart understood. In that simple truth lay hope, not just for the animals Willow had dedicated her life to protecting, but for all living things in their beautiful, broken, ever-evolving shared world.